Thank you for tuning into the Pictures of Lily podcast. I'm your host, Lily Moayeri. I've been a music journalist since 1992, and I interview a lot of music-related people. This podcast is about my experience behind the story, my experience doing the interviews, just to give you a snapshot of what it's like on the other side of the digital recorder.
Pictures of Lily.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the Pictures of Lily podcast. This is our 25th episode. Can you believe it? Thank you for all the support, and we're very excited by all the listeners that have randomly discovered us. It's super motivating to see those stats. You can find us on every platform by going to picturesoflily.com, where you can subscribe or follow us and also connect to us on SoundCloud, YouTube, Pandora, and Amazon. In this episode, I'm going to talk about my experience interviewing all three members of the Texas trio Khruangbin, whom I spoke to for the current issue of Under the Radar magazine. Here are a few snapshots of my experience interviewing Mark Spear, Laura Lee Ochoa, and Donald DJ Johnson of Khruangbin. I first became aware of the Houston band when we were at the Desert Days Festival in 2017. We were eating on these broken down stools outside this tent, and we could hear them doing their instrumental covers of big hip-hop tunes. I was listening hard and saying, "Is this what I think it is?" So we went into the tent to see who was doing these amazing renditions, and that's when we learned of Khruangbin. Lawrence followed them more diligently than I did, but I still kept an eye out for them, and we ended up seeing them open for Leon Bridges at the Greek Theater the following year. It was for their third album, Mordecai, which was released earlier this year, that I spoke to Khruangbin. Just so you know, Mark and Laura were both wearing wigs, which is what they wear when they do anything to do with Khruangbin. Laura still looked gorgeous, and Mark looked like he would rather not be wearing the wig. Mark told me about this half-price store by his parents' house that he spent a lot of time in when he was growing up that was influential on him. This is what he said. CDs were really expensive. I could get records that were $2 or $3 because they were all used. The rock and pop section was really overwhelming to me. The international section was usually really small and easily digestible. I'm going to get this Ravi Shankar record. I'm going to get this record in this language I can't read. I'm going to get this African record. I love soul and R&B and funk, but I never got into rock and roll and pop unless we're talking about pop from other countries. Both Mark and Laura know a lot about Iranian music, much more than I do, and both my parents are Iranian. And they were both schooling me on not only the instruments, but Iranian musicians. I felt their appreciation was so genuine and informed at the same time. When I asked DJ if he was as globally musically inclined as Mark and Laura, this is what he told me. We all have our own ways of finding inspiration. When the band started, we were all in Houston, then Laura moved to London. That's where everything started to roll for us, when our music got into the hands of somebody on the other side of the world. We started to travel, and it worked its way back to the United States. Sometimes America doesn't claim something until someone else thinks it's cool. I never heard any of them say the words psych or rock or jam when they talked about their music, but those are the words that I read most when reading about Khruangbin. The latest album is named after a man called Mordecai that Laura met when she was on a camping trip with friends. She had a really hard time after the end of the last tour, and her time with Mordecai and his family had a positive impact on her. This is what Laura told me. Mordecai and his family are Orthodox Jews, and they take Sabbath every week. After I came back to Houston, I basically took one. I spent 24 hours in silence. It's not exactly what they do, but it was my own version. I didn't listen to anything. I tried not to talk to myself in my head. I just wrote. That was really therapeutic. When I realized how much I got out of it, now I do it more regularly. We've never been a lyrical band. Most of the time, we didn't know what to write about. When I started writing, I realized there's plenty. I told her I had somewhat of a similar experience when I went on this yoga retreat in Bali where I was supposed to have a silent day and do exactly what she did. But I ruined it by being on my laptop the whole time working. And the second time I did the retreat, I ruined it by not being on my laptop, but by reading and checking emails on my phone. That's my snapshot of my experience interviewing Khruangbin. You can read the whole interview in the current issue of Under the Radar magazine. It will eventually be on the magazine's website and linked on picturesoflily.com. And Khruangbin has a Late Night Tales compilation coming out in December. In the next episode, I'll be talking about my experience interviewing Damien Lazarus, whom I interviewed for the cover of DJ Times' DJ Expo Week 2020 issue. From myself and my co-producer, director, editor, Lawrence Schroeder, thanks for listening. And if you have a chance to subscribe or follow the podcast on any of the podcast platforms, please do so. And please rate and review. You can connect to us on picturesoflily.com, and from there you can choose your preferred podcast platform, or SoundCloud, or YouTube, or Pandora, or Amazon. You can also find the playlist for the podcast episodes on Spotify and YouTube. Once again, thanks for listening.
Pictures of Lily.